Hey everyone, it's Brian. Welcome back to my channel. For those who don't know me, I'm an American artist. I live currently in Vietnam, and I've lived in Asia for the last 3 years. I moved to China with my husband, Jeff. He's a teacher. About 3 years ago, and we lived in China for 2 years, and we've been living in Vietnam for a little over a year. Since I've been living in Asia, I've been working on a long-term project called Permutations. Before moving to Asia, most of my work was large-scale oil paintings on wood. And I used to have a really big studio and tons of art supplies, and moving to Asia forced me to downsize. Because our life has become quite nomadic, I've focused on making works on paper. Which is very new to me, only in the Permutation series. And but what it does is allows me to take my work with me wherever I go. Since I've lived in 3 different cities in 3 years, it's very helpful to just be able to put it all in a big portfolio or in a box and take it with me. Here at my channel, I share my artistic process and also my life abroad. I would say it's about 80% art and 20% life as an expat. But it's 100% this guy. So if that sounds fun to you, make sure you subscribe to this channel and go ahead and smash that like button, that thumbs up. In this video, I'll be showing my process on 4 different new permutations, and I'll also be making a favorite recipe that I've never made before, but it was something that I was missing from home. So stay tuned for that. So if you don't already know, all of my permutations start with this same 30-point shape. Sometimes they're larger or smaller, but and sometimes they have more than 30 points, but for the most part, I always use this shape. With this piece, I'm combining 3 colors, white, black, and red. Where there's white paper, I've used red lines. Where there's black color, there's white lines, and the red color has black lines. So something to note is the thickness of the tips of the gel pen versus the two ink pens means that I have to adjust the ruler to make sure the lines stay connected. I've done several pieces using this technique in the past, but I think this is the first time that I've done one with 3 different color pens, which is a lot of work. It's almost like doing 3 different pieces compared to just doing one pen. Having to lift up the pen so many times just creates a lot of work, but as you'll see, I'm pretty happy with the results. So when I go home to visit Chicago, people often ask me like what food I miss a lot, and it's usually hard to answer because I feel like we can get a lot here. But I do really love Mexican food, and fortunately a lot of the ingredients that go in Mexican food we can find here, so that's pretty good. Typically the real issue is consistency. For example, the other day I went to the store expecting to buy chicken, cilantro, and avocado, and they didn't have any of them. So you just kind of have to be really fluid and agile with your plans on making dinner, and also that's really typical here. You just have to be flexible with your meal planning and your expectations. So specifically, one of the things I really miss is sofritas, which is a type of filling that goes into burritos and in burrito bowls at Chipotle, which is like an American Mexican food chain. So that's what I decided to make this week. And you know, my channel's not about being a cooking show, so I'm not really going into huge depth about how I create, sofritas. It's just kind of like showing you a little bit of what my life is like, how I work in the kitchen and stuff like that. So hopefully you're not expecting a step-by-step how-to video of how to cook sofritas, because I just looked up the recipe and followed that, so you can do the same thing.
Is that enough cheese?
I think so.
So I haven't made a collage piece in a while, and they're really popular, and I personally love collage pieces. The issue is that it's really difficult for me to get source material for collage. I'm constantly on the lookout for that, but I'm hoping in the near future to try and be a little bit more experimental with my collage work. I feel like a lot of the pieces I've made recently kind of are the same trick, which is not to say that that's bad. I really like all of them, but I do want to expand my techniques in collage. I just don't know what that means yet. And it's partially because I'm always trying to expand my techniques in how I work, but it's also partially that it's just a necessity because I don't have the right kinds of imagery that I would prefer to have for the style that I've been making lately. That makes me think about, you guys. What are your favorite types of my permutations? I mean, I don't know. Probably a lot of you have not been watching long enough to know all the different types, but I'm really curious, what are people's favorites? I mean, for me personally, I obviously jump around, and I think it's partially I need to, just to make myself feel fresh and be able to approach the art with fresh eyes and stuff like that. But I'd love to hear in the comments what your favorite types of permutations are. It's just good to see my art through other people's eyes. So yeah, leave a comment below. People sometimes ask me how long I'll continue to do permutations and whether or not I get bored. But I think that because I get to do such different techniques within the confines of permutations, it always keeps me engaged. And every time I think I might be getting bored, I discover some new technique that seems to just open up so many new possibilities, and it just makes me fall in love all over again. So, the answer is pretty much no. I'm not bored. I don't really see an end yet. But check back in with me sometime later. So I always try and remember the context of the imagery I use. And I think that these guys are, they're like a group of French politicians walking on before an election. It's sort of like this electioneering process, which kind of reminds me of the ancient Roman tradition of the guy running for consul or whatever magistracy. He's walking to the polls, and all of his followers are just following him in a big parade behind him. And I think that this image is a similar thing, but in France and in the 1950s instead of 80 BC or whatever. Anyway, so I think that this image is kind of pretty topical considering we're still in the midst of an election in the United States, and it's kind of cool. Here is another variation on a theme similar to the first permutation in this video. Once again, I forgot to record the painting portion of this piece, so I'm sorry about that. I can tell you that this step requires a lot of preparation. I have to get out the paints, brushes, I fill up my water glass, I mix the paints, I get the consistency just right. This technique is called dry brush, so I need to use a dry brush, and dip it into the paint. But I have to make sure that the the brush isn't like super saturated. It has to just have the perfect amount of paint on it, which can be a little challenging. I used 2 different brushes for this, one for each color. And when I applied the paint, I only had like the 30 points as my guides, and I just sort of like instinctually decide, based on what my goals are, where to place the paint. I knew just for this composition that I wanted a significant amount of negative space, so that's just kind of what I had in my mind when I was doing the painting part. But so after all that prep, there's like a minute at most of painting, and then I go and clean my brushes and put away the paint and clean up the workspace and make sure there's no paint left over on the table. So the paint dry, and usually I work on another piece simultaneously. And I think for this piece, like while I was waiting for this to dry, I started what will be the next one you'll see in this video. But anyway, so after the paint's dry, I start doing the many hours of line work. So this last piece is ink only, and it was inspired in some ways by the collage piece that is also in this video that you saw just a little while ago. And this is just often how I work. Some detail in a piece draws my attention, and I explore what happens if I focus on that little detail. And what's kind of interesting is I actually made a mistake here. I had intended for like the sort of pinwheel of the lines going out to the edges to be the opposite, so that they were going in the 4 center directions instead of the 4 bias directions, if that makes sense. But anyway, as I've said before, sometimes accidents lead to discoveries, and ultimately I'm not dissatisfied or disappointed with the results, so it worked out okay. So that's it for this week. If you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up. Make sure you subscribe. As always, I would love to hear from you. I hope I provided a little bit of distraction in these crazy times. Please leave a comment. I promise to respond. So I just want to say thanks again. I love you guys, and I'll see you next time.